Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 90. Now, I'm bringing the energy here today because I feel better, fully recovered from COVID. My voice is back to, let's say, winning ways, because it's been a productive week for me in terms of content creation and really grafting on this longer form project, which I am still working on. But in the wider world of MMA news, it doesn't really feel like we've got, in a game that's typically, rife with drama and news, it feels like a relatively chill one by the sports standards. How have you been? What's been going on? Give me the lowdown on the last couple of days for you.
Honestly, I've just been trying to get ahead of the game with my content scheduling. And so I'm a week in advance so that pretty much I can put as much time and attention as possible into the pop-up, because it is requiring so much time, so many logistical configurations, and many people to speak to, organize different things to get shipped in, different packagings to get, different speakers to get, 1,000,001 different nuances to that pop-up. So that's really what I'm trying to do. So
any new developments there? New guests, new features, new things? Or is it all just you've got it already mapped out and it's just about putting the pieces together now?
Yeah, it's more so refining it. It's more so refining the plan. I think the plan is pretty much in place. Maybe there'll be a new guest here and there, potentially. But aside from that, it's just actually rounding out the edges to everything and bringing it all together. A couple of the artwork projects, the comic book isn't quite finalized, but it's not a million miles away from it. There's another art project which I had done for me, which looks incredible. Honestly, incredible. And like I said, it's
actually, can I ask you about that? Actually, just sorry to just interject there, but the only reason I say it is because I was doing some just minor. I was basically flirting with the idea. I know I spoke a while about maybe doing some clothing and looking at commissioning some artists and stuff. And I found some ones that I really liked, and it made me realize how fucking expensive art commissions are. And I don't know if the person I was speaking to was the norm, but I wanted to ask you, obviously you don't have to say, how much cost-wise that's looking for those projects.
It honestly really depends what you're looking for. So it's hard to sort of pinpoint a number on it. I think for me, when it comes to pricing with certain people, I'm very upfront about what I can afford for that particular project. Very transparent about what I can afford for it. And then I'm very transparent as well in what I'm actually going to be doing. So what is the project? What's the information behind it? What's the context? What content will I be creating off the back end of it? How will I be integrating their profiles into all of it? So I think sometimes that's a good way of being able to get a fairer price. It's not that I'm ever trying to lowball artists. I'm trying to always give them what they deserve. But if you're getting things at thousands and thousands of pounds back, sometimes it's better to be more transparent and sort of see what middle grounds you can work with. Sometimes people are going to be resistant to deviating from their normal projects, but sometimes people are happy to meet you in a middle ground if they like what you're sort of offering. So definitely hundreds of pounds still, but not quite thousands as of yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the quote I got, granted, it was with the sort of caveat that I was looking for a commercial license as well to use the art. Of course, if I was to put on clothing, etc., etc. So that obviously added to the price. And on top of the fact, this guy was obviously very experienced and good at what he did. But he was talking about £5,000. I was like, yep, I'm out of there. So a little bit too steep.
Yeah. I think there's ways around that, right? So,
of course, yeah.
You can also be strategic in how you pay the fee. Some people are going to want a flat fee and say, right, if you're going to sell it for commercial use, then I want a flat fee. Some people are going to be more flexible where they would maybe look for a percentage of the profits off the back of the t-shirts. And if they believe in your project and if they believe in your vision, sometimes people would actually prefer that to the cash, because if the finances are correct, they could actually make more money in the long term. So you have to just continuously be having different conversations, reaching out to different people and seeing what you can work, going through your contact list, seeing who you can find that you know someone who may know someone, and just keep working backwards. So yeah, it's definitely not cheap. I will say that, but nothing is cheap in this world seemingly anymore. However,
I'm starting to realize that
I do have a good knack of being able to do things I'm very resourceful. So I always sort of find small ways around things. Where was I before you went on that one?
I mean, that's where we kicked off, really. It's just using about the pop-up, developing the pop-up. New developments, refining was the word that stuck out to me.
About the artwork, and then you said something.
Yeah.
Throwing me off my train of thought.
Did I? I thought we just segued naturally. I thought that's what we're good at. That's what we do.
No, usually. There was just a more poignant point I had for people.
Yeah, usually you usually might drop at the end with that.
But yeah, that's kind of what I'm into at the moment. It's sort of rounding out the edges of the pop-up, and also just putting the feelers out there for telling people about it. This week, I'm really going to start working on the actual tickets for the event.
Yeah.
So that
I was going to say, yeah, we spoke about that, didn't we?
Yeah, so I can get a good idea of sort of numbers, and also tie it into knowing what I mentioned before, knowing roughly who's going to want what, and making sure that if people do want some pieces, they're going to be relatively exclusive. And if they want to reserve some, they can, because there may not be any available on the day. So that will be the comics, obviously. There'll be the T-shirts, the jerseys, and then the prints as well. And then I'll be getting Lon to sign a limited number of those pieces as well. So yeah, that's really been what I've been working pretty much all my time and attention on recently.
Yeah. I'm very excited for it. I can't lie. I'm very excited to. It'll be good. More so, I guess this almost comes from somewhat of a selfish point of view. But it'd be just nice to just connect with people there as well, and just I think it's a difficult thing especially with a sport like MMA, where I think just it's a very terminally online fan base, if that makes sense. You know, it's a very digital world. I mean, most sports are. I mean, that's just 21st century. This is where we are. So having a communal thing like that, where everyone is there for the exact same reason, with the purpose of communicating with each other, rather than to just see a spectacle like the event, of course, that is happening later that day. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to break bread. I actually spoke about it on my stream a little bit, so there might be a couple of people on my stream who were there. Nice. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's a good point you brought up, because that was one thing that happened last time I did it in Manchester, which I didn't really anticipate, to be honest. I thought people would know the brand and obviously be MMA fans and whatnot, but I didn't quite anticipate the long tail version of the creators. But because what started happening is, obviously some people were just general fans of either the page or MMA, but then some people were creators off the back of it that I knew as well. So at the event, people were then interviewing other people there, and they were having sort of impromptu conversations and chats, and it did exactly what you said, brought those people that are usually online together under the guise of sort of Casuals Corner. So it is a good point that you brought up, because that most certainly will happen, and it will also be a networking event for creators as much as it is a sort of pop-up experience as well. So it should merge a lot of different worlds together. And the last thing that you said there, which is 100% correct, obviously a lot of people that I know, creators, and I know very well, they're also then talking about it as well in their streams and posts and stories and comment threads and whatnot. So a lot of other people's audience are also coming along with them, if that makes sense. So I don't know how many people in Manchester. I thought,
what was the Manchester numbers?
Off the top of your head, if you know, there were probably, I think, maybe 15 tops 20 people that came.
How many you expect, you reckon? I'll just shoot a number to you. I think triple that. More.
Easily.
Yeah. Think of the difference from where you are now, on top of the fact of logistically, the location, the timing, everything put together. I think it's gonna smash it.
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think where my brand has developed, the fact I can market it now, the fact I have more time, the fact it's in my home city, so I'm just going to have actual friends anyway that want to come and support it, not even really much to do with MMA, but friends that just ask me, oh, where can I get that t-shirt? Where can I get that jersey or whatever else? They'll come along. On top of the fact it's just down the road from the O2, on top of the fact of I'll then have the audiences of all the people that are coming as creators. Easily 60. Honestly, it's going to be interesting just to see the tickets.
Yeah, again, that's what I said the other week. It adds that extra prestige on top of the logistical sort of aid, which allows you to, track the numbers. You get a bit more insight, right? So there's only a positive in doing that. I mean, how long out are we now? Just over a month. So real final stretch now.
Just over a month.
Yeah, that's not that long actually when you think about it. Goes by quick.
Honestly,
I was thinking that. I was like, damn.
Honestly, I've got quite a few things going on at the moment in regards to a couple of clients I have to do work for. Obviously, my Casuals Corner brand itself, trying to sort out the sponsorships and brand deals off the back of that.
How's that going? Because I know we spoke about that before we recorded in person a couple of weeks ago. We did briefly speak about that, and I know you were working, sort of going the extra mile and trying to, put that together. So how's that?
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second, and we'll talk about that.
If you are, of course, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. We've both got some things that we can share on that, so I will do. But my point was really, I'm still trying to sort of create a solid infrastructure for the brand. But then on top of that, I've really just tried to realize that it isn't far away. And I want this to be not something which is happening, but I want it to be spectacular. I want it to be very memorable. I want it to be a very, very thoughtful, meticulous event on every single level. And I think when you see the projects, which I'll unveil step by step, you'll really see the detail and the care and the thought that has gone on at every process. But I've also been understanding that a month is not a long time. So I honestly have just been more disciplined and motivated and dialed in than I think I've ever been in my brand's journey. 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a skill in itself. That's a really tricky thing to do, especially in what we do as a profession, which is so not just volatile in terms of performance and from an analytical perspective, but just in terms of your day-to-day, what you're doing. Things can be different. You might just change gears and start going down a different route. That's something I can really relate to this week. So I've had to sort of, I guess, face my maybe mental weaknesses in some capacity, because my original plan for this video that I was working on, the Volkanovski one, was to do maybe 2 weeks, spend 2 weeks on it. And then, of course, we spoke at the start of last week's episode or the week before. You said, why not spend a month on it? It works better for timing. And I was like, you're right. So that's what I decided to do. And with that comes a whole new host of challenges. As you said, it's about sort of staying on the horse, staying motivated for one, and, keeping on top of things. That's the harder thing to do when you're working on a bigger project, because logistically it's a tougher challenge. You've got a lot more moving parts. Like, even if it's just little things. Like, for example, I'm working on it on separate timelines in 3 different parts, and then I'm going to merge them together at the end, just because I don't know whether it's a psychological thing or timeline-wise it's just a little bit easier. Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
But it's just an easier time for me, putting it all together by doing it that way. And it's little things like that which I think you have to be ready to sort of tackle, if you will. It's a new challenge for me, so exciting, daunting, in many ways, but yeah, enjoying the process. It's coming along nicely, actually. Starting really the second half of it now, so we're on the back end. So it's good.
You said about enjoying the process just there, and I know we spoke about it briefly the other week, but this is definitely the first time consistently where I've woke up or gone to bed even and woke up almost excited for what I have to do today. And it's not always the most exciting tasks that I'm doing and piecing together. Like I said, sometimes it's talking to suppliers from a different country. Sometimes it's sending out a few emails and whatnot. However, oh my goodness, I haven't even mentioned the main thing. However, it's definitely the most exciting sort of, I go to bed writing my to-do list and I'm waking up and I'm ready to hit it. And I don't get it twisted. That has never really been the case before.
And I'm glad you said that, because there's an unrealistic expectation like that is when you see, obviously take this as a compliment. I think from the outside, you look like someone who's got everything on dial or like in gear completely, and that from a mental perspective, right? But obviously that's never a realistic, reality. It's not realistic to see that and think that. And I'm glad you say that because, from the outside, as I said, you look like you've got everything in check, but all likelihood you definitely don't. It's probably a lot of downs. And I think that goes for both of us. Like, it's just a tough game.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's downs, but
downs is the wrong word. It's more so just you get what I'm saying.
For sure,
it's tough. It's hard.
Yeah. The reason I say it's not downs is just because, in perspective, that it's micro.
Yeah.
Dips. It's not really if I'm healthy, waking up, my family's healthy, and I'm doing the job. That's
already
starting at the peak, right? So that's why I say it like that. But it's just more so I've not been as infused, as ready to be.
Yeah, that's the better way of it.
Having a workout. I'll have a workout first thing. I'll get a nice coffee, sit down at my desk, put my headphones on. I've never really had good headphones. Now I've got very good quality headphones.
Which ones?
You got
the Bose ones.
One of the new Bose ones, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've seen them, of course. Yeah. You show me.
So I've never had that before. So that just makes it even more enjoyable. I've got a nice coffee. It's super iced. I've got my technique down to a T. I've got my to-do list now. I've got my laptop that doesn't lag. It can be off the charger. Yeah. These are tiny things, but oh my goodness, they make me so content. And when I sit down on my laptop, there's just minimal, if any, barriers for me to do fantastic work. And I say all of this, and obviously, I know, again, we spoke about it the other day, but all of this that I'm trying to dial into, but also understanding that the following week, just 7 days after, the TWC London event is happening as well.
So that was what you were waiting to say. Nice.
Because
that must be another logistical challenge.
It's just really picking up. Everything's just really picking up with it. So, and being someone
I don't know how you manage. I really don't. There's just so many moving parts. Because as I said, I'm almost preferring doing these longer projects because I'm focused on one thing for a sustained period rather than jumping between. That's where I tend to struggle more. So that's probably my weak point in it from a creative side of things. I just can't. I'm not great at managing multiple different things, which, seems to be at this point really your specialty. So I don't know what it is.
I won't get into that side tangent, but one of the things that I'll say for it, right, is you hear a phrase sometimes and it says multitasking is multi-failing, and it's true. It is true. If you're multitasking, you're multi-failing. You should be putting all your time and your effort into one thing, and you'll rise the quickest, or you will rise quicker to the top of whatever that is. For example, for me, if I did nothing, but I thought, you know what, I want to grow the best YouTube channel that I can. I want to make as much money on YouTube as I possibly can in the MMA space, and I did nothing else. That would be the best way for me to get to the top of that game for myself.
That's basically my shoes, isn't it? Yeah.
What's that?
That's essentially my shoes, really, the way you describe it.
Which is the best way to do it, right? Technically the best way to do it. But what took me a very long time to realize is speaking to people and listening to people a lot wiser than myself, and they would all echo that same sentiment, which I knew was correct. I knew it would be. I knew that if I did nothing but focused on my clothing, it would be, I know what it was. I'll circle back to that I said earlier. This is how my mind works, right? This is literally the insight into it. But what I was saying is that is correct, but you also need in life, in everything, whether it's fitness, whether it's business, whether it's flipping French, whatever it is, you also need to understand how to adapt it for you and your style. And I've said a million times, my brain just cannot work in a way where I have one thing and I just work on that. It just can't do it. I just cannot do it. I have to have multiple things that I can dip into and dive into. Now, is it the most efficient way to do it? Probably not. Is it the most efficient way to get the best at one thing? Absolutely not. But it technically is for me, because it allows me to enjoy it and me to do it sustainably. So that's what people, there's so much nuance
that's
to every approach, you know?
Yeah, it's a personal, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it's specific to you, essentially. That's how you're going to be the most optimized version of yourself, I think, in the working world. But going back to what you were saying, of course, you were referring to, yeah.
So I've had in
Smirk has got me
always,
intrigued.
I always have ideas. I've said it to you before. I sort of call it the ideas shelf. I've heard Stephen Bartlett talk about this. And effectively, if you're someone that always has ideas, you're always going to want to have these ideas and execute on them and whatnot. And some are good and some are less good. And what you really need to do with it is when you get these ideas, you just put them on the ideas shelf in the back of your head. And if you find that you keep revisiting these ideas, maybe it's a month later, maybe it's a year later, maybe it's 2, 3 years, 5 years later, sometimes even 10. I've had ideas that are 10, 15 years later. And if you keep revisiting them, you know there's something there. You know you have to scratch that itch to some extent.
That's a good point. Yeah.
If it fades away, you probably didn't need to scratch that itch, right? Maybe it was just a more heat of the moment sort of thing. But if you keep coming back to this little shelf of this little idea, there's probably a reason of why you keep coming back to that.
I can relate to that actually from just quickly, side tangent, we're going to run it. I can sort of relate to that from a completely non-MMA related perspective, because obviously before I'd started the channel and my original plan was at uni to do game design and work in the games industry. And of course that didn't work out, but way before that, when I was in sixth form, I remember having a sort of brainwave moment while just doing coursework in computing, which I found mind-numbingly boring. But you know, as you said, an idea that you come back to is obviously something of great importance. But I think there's another level of that where you have an idea and straight away you don't even, it's not even a consideration of something. You come back, from as soon as you think of the idea and it sticks with you permanently from then on, it's going to be what you should and need to do. And it's ironic because I haven't even acted on it, because I had an idea for a game, which I still have written down deep in my notes tab on my phone somewhere. But I always think back to it on, sporadically, even though that's not the path I'm down anymore. There's no reason to say maybe I won't revisit it one day, because I still think about it now. So that, as you said, I recognize that importance of coming back to it mentally. Just some food for thought, really. Just, maybe one day. Now I'm getting motivated. Screw it, I'm dropping everything. I'm going back.
You can also execute it on just a smaller level, right? This is something that I always say. It is actually...
If it wasn't a game, normally I'd agree with you, but logistically, they are probably the most
intricate,
ridiculous things I've ever seen in trying to make.
Because you're thinking too grand. I always tell you this. It's so true. If you're saying, if you have a rebuttal to that, it's because you're thinking of the end game too much. Quite literally, you're thinking of the furthest point from where you are, which is a complete game, which is an incredible amount of work. But what would that look like on a micro scale of what you do currently? Well, it's very obvious. You have a games channel, which you talk about games. You will talk about a video of your idea of the game.
That's true. I didn't even think of it merging it. Yeah, I hadn't even considered that, marrying those two sort of ideas together. That's an interesting point, actually. I was thinking of it from a detached sort of concept, right? Obviously on a micro level, you're talking like building maybe a prototype at the very level, like very least. And even then, that's still difficult to do. And I am far from the best programmer designer. I'm terrible at that. So
I'm not learning, actually. But... This is how my brain would work towards that sort of thing, right? So you have the end result, which is the game, which is a million miles away. That's you doing your first teaser session of MMA and thinking about Alex Volkanovski, right? Becoming him. You're a million miles removed from that currently. You're too many degrees of separation away to even worry about that. But what you can do is you can start creating the infrastructure. So you already have the infrastructure.
Yeah.
You have an audience, you have a chat channel, you have a platform. You literally talk about gaming. So you just want to reduce that to the most micro level. So the micro level of that would look like, okay, I made a video of I came up with a game 5 years ago and I still think it's great. And you just talk about it, right? You just talk about whatever the game is. And then what starts happening with that is maybe 100 people watch it, but maybe the right person watches it who just knows someone who develops games as just a side hobby. And he doesn't do it big time, but he just enjoys doing it as a little hobby.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a case of you reach out to him and you start establishing a sort of relationship, and then you start just talking about prototypes one day, and maybe you send him 100 quid here and there, and maybe he just starts building out little features. And then next thing you know, you got 100,000 subscribers on your main channel, and you happen to know someone in game development that you send an email to cold one day, and they just so happen to get back to you. And now you're in a board meeting talking about someone potentially using the IP, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. But I mean, you know, as much as I actually completely agree with you, I'll play a bit of devil's advocate here, just as a sort of antithesis. I'm actually very glad you mentioned Volkanovski, obviously, because I've been basically delving into his entire life for the last 2 weeks. But it's poignant because he had a quote. I was looking back on how he got into MMA and trying to find sort of clips which were notable and sound bites that I thought worked. And he said that even before he started even training MMA, it's almost the opposite of what you said. He wasn't thinking about just getting on the mat for the first time or, you know, put on the gloves. Before he was even training MMA, he was saying, I'm going to be a world champion. I want to be a world champ. And he was thinking about having the belt around his waist and saying he was going to do that. And he hadn't even stepped foot in an octagon or a cage or anything like that. So I guess there is another angle there. Please provide the counter.
I don't think there is a counter. I don't think there is a counter at all. I think both exist in the same world. I think you can still do the micro level, but your thoughts are the extreme level. That's where your thought has to be.
Ah, okay,
but your
right.
action,
practically applying it.
Yeah, your practicality is micro. Volt's practicality was micro. He went to his first ever wrestling class on an off season in the rugby season, right?
Good knowledge. Good knowledge.
Mate, come on. Don't.
Yeah, I mean, I expect you to know, be fair.
Come on.
But good. Yeah,
Friend of the casuals.
Of course, yeah. He knows.
Currently holds a Food Fighters t-shirt, one of one design.
Somewhere.
Food Fighters, one of one design.
That is pretty cool, isn't it?
His practicality, it was the micro. I'm glad you brought it up because it's so true. You're in practice, you have to be on the micro level, but your thought process should always be on the macro. Your thought process should be GTA 6 level and getting it developed by the highest and the best. That should be your thought process, because why wouldn't it be? But on an actual day-to-day, you have to be realistic and understand how you can bring it back to what you're able to do in this current market, if that makes sense. So yes, you're not going to be able to pay $10 million to completely scale it out yet. But if an idea is good enough, trust me, there's a lot of people out there that want to throw money at good ideas. And people always, this is another thing as well. People always think that if you go and watch Dragon's Den recently, you'll see a shift. I'm seeing a little bit more at least. And Dragon's Den is something that I've watched since I was about 8 years old. This is actually
Shark Tank for the Americans is the British
Shark Tank, yeah, sure.
Shark Tank, yeah.
Which is actually funny because side tangent, but
yeah, don't fall into the trap.
The Shark Tank
don't do it.
Product was talking to my page yesterday, called Guy Robes or something. It was kind of funny. They make robes for UFC fights, which I think is funny, but
that is cool.
Regardless, there's a slight shift, especially with Stephen Bartlett. You'll see. He's been investing a lot recently, but the product hasn't been fantastic. The finances maybe haven't been fantastic. But what you'll hear the smartest people in business say, and people that make investments say, Gary Vee is someone that coined the phrase that I always use, is you're betting on the jockey, not the horse, right? The horse is the project. So your horse would be the game. But if you're going into Silicon Valley and pitching your idea for the game, they may think it's good and they may think you've got something, but they also may see 100 pitfalls and they think, okay, maybe it's not that successful. But they could just invest purely on knowing that the jockey yourself is ultimately going to be successful. Because people either have it or they don't. And people have 100 failing things and 100 failing projects. But if it's the right person, if they're good enough, they'll eventually have a successful one. And good people in business understand that. So it's also just about understanding that sometimes, you'll have the project, the horse, a good one. But sometimes it's just about being a good jockey, you know?
Yeah, I think part of being a good jockey comes back to what we were saying about, you know, applying practically versus your thought process and the contrast there. And I think the result of that mindset and thinking that way is you have a lot of just seeds planted at the very minimum. You know, a lot of seeds just planted in different areas of wherever you're operating. So for me, it's YouTube. And that's really come to fruition for me, actually, literally, because the last few days, if we're talking from an analytical perspective on YouTube, I saw, it's actually quite coincidental, I saw a Twitter thread which talked about building a catalog of videos. Let's call them seeds in this example. And it's about a long-term sustainability. So as you build out more videos, each of them are just, they're like you're planting a new seed and they can just sprout at any time and almost keep growing randomly. And that started happening to me. I had it's again, the video on my channel that I hate the most is my second most viewed video, or second or third most viewed video, and it's awful. It's terrible, but
it's not. Though,
irrespective of that, yeah, well, it isn't. Apparently, right? According to the viewers, it's not. They want to watch that sort of thing, but it's interesting because that video had been on a flat curve. It done really well at the start for the first few months, as it did. Hit 400,000 views, which is insane. And then it had been dead in the water for genuinely, again, I ballpark in here, I can't remember off the top of my head, probably 7 months, maybe even more. And only a couple weeks ago, graph was going like this, and then it's like that. For no reason. I could not tell you why that is. I don't know what stars are aligning in the YouTube algorithm. Sorry?
Who was it?
What do you mean? It wasn't on a fight. That's what I'm saying. It was the UFC fan video. It was just every type of UFC fan, which is an evergreen concept. So obviously there's something to draw from there. But just fundamentally, I couldn't tell you why that video, blew back up. Usually it's a little bit easier when you have something like a fighter who's about to fight. You repackage your video in time and, sometimes it can ride that wave. But it's kind of not the point. I think the point is building that catalog is just so beneficial, especially when they're really high quality videos. I'm not saying that one is. I don't think it is personally. But doing that just is it's only a good thing. And that builds up, obviously, a gradual minimum bar of passive income, which gives me more flexibility and freedom. Like, for example, I haven't uploaded in... let me just check really quickly. I haven't uploaded in 3 weeks, pushing a month. And I've still, again, I'm happy to be transparent about it. I'm not saying this is a sort of boast because it's not. It's just to prove my point. I made $1.5 grand in the last month, and I haven't even uploaded. So it's a
weird
game. No, please. I'd made my point.
It's a very good point you brought up, because there's a guy called Jordan Welch, I believe his name is. Big YouTuber, regardless, not that important. But he said not that long ago, which is exactly speaking into your point, which is very true, is a lot of people talk about forms of passive income, right? It's such a buzzword, passive income.
Yeah,
passive
I don't
income.
like to use it.
But you're right. And let me tell you why, because there's a lot of things that people bracket in passive income, but it's actually not passive at all. People will say that property or renting out property is passive income. It's not at all. You have to either have a property manager and they deal it and you deal with them, and then maybe cleaning staff and maybe people off the back of that, or you do it all firsthand. So it's not passive whatsoever. But with media, it truly is passive, because once you create it, the UFC fan video, you created the UFC fan video, you posted it, you would then, let's say you don't even adjust the thumbnail or title ever, which would maybe take at best 30 minutes once.
Yeah,
you never touch it again. And that earns passively. It's one of the truest, purest forms of passive income is media. And that just comes back into what we've spoken about many times, is you read Naval Ravikant's book where he talks about leverage. One of the forms of leverage is media. And that's exactly why, because I post a video and you post a video on Friday night. We go to sleep. We've slept for 8 hours. And whilst we're sleeping, people are watching and the platforms are paying us. So once you've created it, it truly then becomes a passive form of income, which I don't think is really spoken about enough at all, to be honest. So it's good that you brought that up. Yeah. But we talk about planting the seeds, right? It's going back to my original train of thought. I've wanted to, as soon as I went to Thailand and started training a little bit, right? I fell in love with not the fashion of it, the shorts, the fabrics, the silk, the satin, the designs, the way that it ties into people's fighting styles, and the whole experience of it was just super enjoyable. And then I started to see this shift as well, where they started becoming somewhat statement pieces. And then I start looking at the big brands.
Of what exactly? You didn't actually say.
Muay Thai shorts.
Yeah, you didn't say. You didn't. I assumed, but you didn't actually say Muay Thai shorts.
Did I not?
No, you didn't. That's. I was trying to put it together. Right, this. What is he actually talking about here? I did assume it was Muay Thai shorts.
Muay Thai shorts. So I then decided to sort of build a prototype, right? This is what I always say about doing things on a more micro level. You talk about the game and I say, right, what's a micro level you could create a video on it?
Yeah.
Well, I want to create my own Muay Thai shorts. So what's that on a micro level? Well, I could just create a prototype, right? I could get some plain black shorts that I vaguely like and get the design for my logo, which I like. And then I can just put them on that to give a slight visual. I could use them in my videos, develop the sort of subconscious links for people that when they see me and they see casuals, they'll then see the shorts, they'll see me in Thailand, and
synonymous.
Exactly that, right? I'm beginning to make these and form these links.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when I was young, obviously I've grown up in an area like Essex, London, where it's always been about the clothes you're wearing, the designers that are embossed upon your fabric, right? It's always been a massive thing, a way to project, a way to signal. And I never really subscribed to it. I had times where I did, but it wasn't really truly me. I was probably doing that more to fit in. And I always kind of knew that deep down. But
yeah, I think when you're younger, it's more.
Yeah, for sure.
Isn't it?
And you're still just trying to find your sort of identity and style with your life and how you perceive things. But one thing I did always like was my brother was always super into that sort of stuff, like really nice clothes and designers and things like that. I wasn't. But he used to always have these swimming shorts called Vilebrequins, if you've heard of them.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, it's not a very well-known brand, but it kind of... It is if you know the industry of that.
If you're
sort
in
of,
that if you're
in that sort of, you would. It's quite well known, and essentially all it is are good quality, kind of rascal designs. Is a good way of sort of putting it for swimming shorts, right? And the price point is probably around £250, £300.
Fuck that.
Yeah, so. I used to always just steal his. I used to just steal his and wear them when I went to Zante when I was 18. I'd nick a pair I would always steal his. And I'd never pay for them myself. But when I wore them, I was like, these feel nice. These feel nice. The reason I'm telling you that is because when I start looking at these Muay Thai shorts, I started looking at what people do already, what designs are out there, what price points are out there, what things I like and what things I change. And then I started to realize that there's this really big shift in this sort of area where I live and kind of where we live, and places like Manchester and Liverpool, which all have very similar fashion senses to places like London and Essex. And there's a massive shift of people not really going to Marbella and Ibiza much anymore. Now they're going to Thailand. They're going to Thailand and they're training. And they're training Muay Thai. And now you've got people like Central C going to train Muay Thai in Thailand. Now you've got people like Wiz Khalifa going and training in Thailand with their own Muay Thai shorts. And I started realizing that there's this cultural shift of people moving away from sort of more alcohol and drugs and more moving towards health.
Literally the direct opposite. Almost like an unrealistic utopian, from like a social media perspective, if I'm going to be a bit cynical with it. Like a sort of utopian, perfect health and lifestyle world, as you said. I know exactly what you mean. For
sure, but also just the younger generations are not drinking as much anymore. They're not smoking as much anymore. So there's like a shift, right? So I started realizing that I started sort of curating these designs in my head and started realizing there is a big gap which I could naturally fill for a high quality, highbrow design of Muay Thai shorts, which have a certain sort of look and feel and meaning behind them for the clientele that are now shifting towards Thailand. In simple terms, the Vilbrequins of Muay Thai, the casuals of Muay Thai, right?
I think that's such a big thing as well. Sorry to just kind of, because it reminds me, it's such a big thing to acknowledge that you're ahead of the curve when you're doing something, because as you said, there's a gap in the market. Being able to realize that and just acknowledge that. A lot of people realize it too late. When we first started this podcast, I remember saying we're in such a privileged position because we aren't at that point like so many people, and obviously everyone goes through this experience of realizing you're too late to something. You missed the boat on something. You're like, damn, you see something great and you're like, that's such a good idea. I could have thought of that, but I didn't. And you missed the boat. So acknowledging that you're on the boat way before everyone else and being able to act on it is another thing. But I say that as a YouTuber as a whole, and particularly the niche I'm in. I think when I started, MMA as a niche was pretty small. There wasn't really that many people, especially from a personal, individual perspective. If it's all about content creators, not many people at all. And I was right at the start of that ship sailing off. So in your context of these Muay Thai shorts, I think that's such a big thing. Even if you're just at the first steps of it and you've made that first sort of initial test run, if you will, of the casuals Muay Thai shorts, even just being there at this time is just massive. Like I completely agree. I think there's a massive opportunity there for you.
I agree, but I also somewhat disagree, and I've said this to you before, because I don't think timing is great if you can get the timing, right? If you can get the timing of the market, that's fantastic. But I always say, you don't always have to be first. You just have to be best. If you're great at what you do on YouTube and you come into a saturated market, you'll do great. It doesn't really matter, right? So it's always about being best, not necessarily first. And coming back to what I said, there is a gap in the market. Sometimes you need to ask yourself, is there a market in the gap? Which I think is important, right? There's a gap in the market, but is there an actual market? Is there a demand in that gap? Sometimes that's the thing that people forget. I certainly believe there is. And the thing that I'll say to you is, you are right, and I do acknowledge that. But I also acknowledge that I'm not looking to execute on this idea because I believe there is a potential. That's not why I'm looking to do that. I'm just fortunate that there is, but it happens to be just very natural and organic. I want to create this. I've got the vision to create it, but just when I look at the market, I'm just fortunate that there isn't anything really filling that void. So they just so happen to go hand in hand. Because sometimes what I think people make the mistake with is they look at ideas or projects or whatever it is and they think, oh, there's a gap in the market there, and they just try and run to it and jump to it. But are you the right person to fill it is more so the question, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think, I know you use a good counterpoint you had about the timing thing, and you don't have to be first. But I think equally coming with being first is also a good thing because it gives you more time to perfect the craft when no one else is.
For sure.
And I'm not saying people aren't making Muay Thai shorts, but in the specific route you want to take it, I don't think there's people doing it. And there will be, regardless of whether you act on it or not, there will be, because you said that gap is there and it will get filled. I agree, there's definitely potential there. So if you won't do it, someone else will. But the difference is if you're first, you've got more time to perfect. And by the time everyone else is there, you're already way above the pack anyway. So I think there's a... Yeah.
You're spot on. You're spot on there. But if you're building a brand, you hold the ultimate trump card, because again, it's planting the seeds, right? It's evergreen. So it's not a case of someone comes along, right? I'll paint the picture. Someone comes along and says, right, okay, I think that's a good idea. I think we can do that. And they do it, and they do it successfully. Cool. There's a lot of money to go around in many different industries. It's not that I think that would strip it. But what they won't have, or what I will have, at least, maybe they will have it as well, but is a personal brand, is 3 years, 5 years, 6 years of community building, is brand identity.
Yeah, that is massive.
To me, right? So I don't even have to, I have said this from the start and I'll say it till the end. I'm going to say this again because I've said this before, but I was so lucky I've said this actually a lot, but I will say it again.
yeah.
I was so lucky.
You keep repeating that I'll say it again. And you said I'll say it again. So you're saying I'll say it again. Carry on. Sorry.
I'm working in the matrix.
I had to say it.
But the last personal training client that I ever had before I just went full-time into Casuals Corner, they were the founders of the biggest designer clothes company for children in the world. And they started completely humble beginnings at zero, just making a couple of stitchings and t-shirts together in their house down the road from me. Completely humble beginnings. They scaled it to the most world-renowned designer clothes store for kids in the world. And they had a 10-year, something like that, ongoing series on Channel 4. And then they exited the business for millions of pounds. So I was very fortunate that I could just ask a simple question. I remember when I spoke to her, this was a couple of years ago, and I just said, I've just been thinking about, I've thought for a long time about having clothes for my brand and building it out like that. And she said, oh, what price point were you thinking? And I said the price point, and she said, oh, no, absolutely not. She said the mistake that everyone makes is they try and make things the most affordable and try and get it into the hands of everyone. She said that's the worst idea ever. You want to make it less affordable and get it in the hands of the right person. She said that her business was doing very well. And then one day, I think it was maybe Rihanna or Beyonce, had bought one of their items and they were photographed in California.
Yeah.
Their life was never the same again. Ever. Their life was never the same again after one photo. Not because they were trying to create something which was super affordable and get everyone to buy it. No, they had exclusive things that not a lot of people could buy. And the photo just changed their life forever. Now, I'm telling you this. Think about
the Volkanovski thing. That's where my mind's going.
The Volkanovski thing, for sure. But what happens if I create this pair of shorts, right? What happens if I create the beautiful, bespoke, silk/satin pair of Muay Thai shorts?
Yellow and black, baby.
That have the yellow and black, but they have the native mango pattern print on them. And they are a thing of beauty. And it just so happens that the next time that Central C goes to Thailand, he's wearing a pair of these shorts.
I could see it, to be honest with you.
You know?
I could see it. Yeah, honestly, it wouldn't even surprise me. It honestly wouldn't. It's just a very realistic possibility, as you said, with that gap and where I think general culture, particularly in, I think city culture rather, is going. Yeah, 100%. I could see something like that happening. Maybe not. Maybe even bigger than Central. So you never know. As I said, thoughts got aim high, shoot high. Wow.
Justin Bieber. And then I'm thinking, what's actually happening now as well with Muay Thai shorts? They're crossing over into the mainstream of fashion, and you're seeing girls just wear them. So I can see Rihanna in a pair.
Fuck it, why not?
No, I'm being dead serious.
No, I know, and I'm laughing, but I'm not. It's not in jest, you know. And some people might look at it that way, but I the thing is, this is what I said about missing the boat, right? People will laugh at it, and then down the line, they'll realize that you were right, and they missed the boat. They missed the boat on the opportunity, and it's sailed. It's gone. And yeah, you have to just shrug those people off, those opinions off. I know that's kind of a nothing burger statement. It's almost stating the obvious, but it really is true. Like we're talking about a very specific thing that is, or rather to you, very personal to you. Like it's very much related to you, but the point still stands. Like that is absolutely true. So, I mean, I'm excited to see where the shorts are going because I like the first pair a lot, I have to say, even though I'm not particularly a Muay Thai practitioner. As you said, it's becoming almost a fashion statement in a lot of ways now. So I might have to pick some up myself.
It's also just becoming a casual pair of, quite literally, of shorts that you would wear around the house, right? You would wear to lounge in because of the...
I do.
Yeah. Because of the materials, some of the cheaper ones they're not nice fabric, right? They're more so polyester and they're not very comfortable. But if you get a really good silk and satin blend, phenomenally comfortable, incredibly comfortable. So they are becoming this sort of casual fashion piece, but then they're also it's not that they need practicality to be successful, but they also do have a purpose, right, as well. And I think sometimes when you look at fashion and you see the crossovers that do the best, it's those things that actually start with utility but cross over into fashion. Converse was the biggest and the only basketball shoe forever. And then it became less so important in basketball, but then became one of the most staple fashion pieces of all time.
Yeah, mic drop. Yeah, fuck it. Casual clothing is going to become a global superpower in the fashion realm. You never know. Might as well say it. Manifestation and that, to quote Israel Adesanya.
The reason I believe
slightly indirectly.
The reason I believe it wholeheartedly is because what I always say to you when we talk about business ideas is I just cap the downside. Well, it's very easy to cap the downside because I'll just create these pieces for myself because I want to wear them and know what I want to wear. And I just wear them in my videos. And now my videos are on 40 million monthly views and I'm in all of them. The downside is very, very capped. I'm not buying infinite stores of inventory and hoping that they sell out and trying to do loads of paid ads. No, I'm making completely organic content with me in it, in the pieces, and then off the back of it, creating a social brand and creating a meaning behind what it means to have casual clothing on. Because whenever you have a brand on, whenever you have a logo on your chest or your hat, whatever it may be, you're telling someone a message. You're always telling a message. And the message is casuals. And the message behind that is the ability to start from zero, to get exponentially better by doing micro steps, living a life where you can do the things you enjoy, travel the world, eat nice food, watch MMA, have some clothes. Like, it's just the message of what I enjoy. So I don't really think there's a downside to it. And I think the upside is uncapped. So I think over the next 20 years, it's just a certain bet. I honestly believe that.
With enough time. Yeah.
Sorry, I get all riled up.
No, I mean, I always love listening to it because I can tell that it's not. A lot of people say a lot of things. It's easy to talk a lot and just waffle, but action is a different thing. But I think if we talk about track record, I think you're pretty good at backing up what you say. I think there is not a lot of people who can really do that. So full credit from me in a lot of ways. I actually was going to circle back because we said we were going to do it. We almost went on one giant mega tangent, and that was your progression with brand deals and stuff like that. Because obviously I've been in that realm, and we spoke about it briefly a couple of weeks ago. You know, I've secured one for my next big video, which is exciting. So that's some nice, obviously financially, that's some nice sort of extra security.
Why don't you give people some details about that, how it happened, how it came about?
In what, logistically, or
yeah, just
I don't know if I won't talk about the brand just in case. Don't have to. Until I've done it. But yeah, it's basically, I mean, I try and take the initiative in a lot of these situations by emailing first, to varying degrees of success. But this one just came out of the blue. I think that's from, you know, obviously you're planting the seeds, you have your email, even if it's just little things like that, having your email in your descriptions and obviously your profile. Honestly, I've seen some big YouTubers who they don't even do that. And I was like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. How are you supposed to get these people to contact you?
Great point.
It's ridiculous. I don't. It's the first thing I did before it was even monetized. I did that because I knew going forward that you know that's like an expectation from these companies. So I got a cold email from them. Pretty simple, and you know, a little bit of negotiating. I'm a lot better at that now. I'm a lot. I think something I learned, probably instilled from my mum, particularly, obviously she's very business minded, is to not settle for less, particularly when it comes to negotiations and stuff like that. And I tried to really run by that mindset when I first started and my first couple of brand deals, but I applied it here as well. Again, it's a bit of a back and forth when it comes to negotiations. So it's just how it is. You can't take things personally. I think that's something I'm a lot less emotionally invested into it now. It's business at the end of the day. But yeah, so happy with the figure as a whole. And I know for a fact with the pivot into the style of content that I'm making, I know that the quality is going to be better, and I know the viewership on average will go up, which means I can start charging more in terms of individual brand deals, and more of them will come in. And now it's just a matter of writing the script, back and forth communication over email, and putting it together and basically getting the all clear. So that's the kind of a next step of the next couple of weeks. On top of finishing the video, is I need to do the advertising segment as well. So more moving parts, but realistically, if we're talking about work for the price or you're getting, it's not bad. So I'm all for it. But it's exciting. But it's a lot more moving parts than people realize. It's quite stressful when it comes to closing a brand deal because there's no guarantees until you sign that dotted line. And there's definitely relief that comes with that. I'm sure you can relate to it, but it's all up in the air until that moment. So there is stress with that, I have to say.
Yeah, there's definitely lessons to be learned in business. And one of the lessons is it is not done until that signature is on the page, which is for sure a good point. But also as well, you talk there about you're getting better at understanding to be less emotional, which is a big point, and how to negotiate, which is a big point. But it's also with the underlying understanding that you're worth a bit more. You know that you actually have leverage now. You know Good that point. You have an established audience. You know that you have an average viewer, your average retention rate. You have more of a platform of proof to actually speak on. Whereas when you're at the start, it's all a little bit more up in the air and it's a little bit more...
Yeah, I tell you what that is actually for me directly. But personally, it was almost like when I first had my first brand deal, first couple, it was almost the expectation that I assumed they were just trying to take advantage of me, knowing that thinking I'd be clueless about how much I can actually, because that's why they ask you for your rate, right? Generally speaking, because they want you to lowball yourself. And thankfully I never really did that. But as you said, now when there's more proof, your viewership is more consistent, you've had more experience working with brands, there's almost a prestige and status that comes with that. So they know what to expect when they're working with you and vice versa. So I go into negotiations with brands in a completely different mindset now than when I first did, because I'm trying to get what I want rather than just sort of meeting in the middle and pleasing. I don't try and, feign sympathy or, go half measures or anything like that. I know my worth. I know what I can bring to the table. And I think more about that rather than what they can get out of me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
it's a tricky line to balance on. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, in contrast to that, that's one style of doing it, right? So you have the individual approach where maybe people reach out to you directly and you can speak to them, which is one way of doing it. Or maybe you reach out to them and hopefully people get back to you and you can initiate the conversation like that. Alternatively, we're dropping some game today, I tell you that.
Yeah, I know. Meat on the bone, mate.
Really is.
Off the rip.
Someone
sage-like knowledge.
I was talking about some of the best podcasts, right, the other day, and I did a part 2 for it, and I put this podcast, and it wasn't for a shameless plug, because if we were just sitting there talking about MMA every week,
wait, say again, sorry, what did you do?
So I made a post on the best podcast.
Oh, right.
And I did a breakdown of just that, and it did really well. So I thought, okay, I'll do a part 2 on it. So I did a part 2, and on the part 2, I put our one as well. If we just had a podcast speaking about MMA, although I believe that we both know what we're talking about and we can articulate a point very well, I wouldn't put us on there at all. Of course not. We're not.
We ain't ever really fought. I mean, obviously, I've trained a bit, and so have you, but that's not even. Of course, yeah. I mean, some coaches never fought a day in their lives in terms of on the highest level. Yeah.
Honestly, there's benefits to everything, right? And there's obviously benefits and insights that you get from coaching. But the mistake people make is they think if you fall, you then become someone who's an expert at articulating the game. It is not correct. More times than not, it's the opposite. More times than not, people's strengths are in the training room, are in the cage. Sometimes people don't really know why they're doing these things. They're just doing it because they were taught to do that. And they're fantastic athletes and they can apply it like that. But then when they get asked about how to break that down or what they see or give a prediction, they're not that great at it. That's why people like Bisping or Dominic Cruz or Paul Felder or Daniel Cormier, they're more few and far between. Kamaru Usman, Michael Chiesa. There's not millions of those guys.
I'm glad you said Chiesa. I like him.
There's not millions of those guys out there, right? Because people just think, oh, you fought, you know it, and you're good. No, that's actually not how it works. But coming back to my original point, as a side tangent, come back to my original point. If we were just talking about MMA, I wouldn't have put us on there. But if this industry is growing in regards to the creator industry just in general, right? And then in MMA, even more so.
On the boat, mate.
There is no one, and I mean no one, doing what we do. Because not only is there no one really having these conversations candidly, frequently, there's no one doing it at the scale we do it. You're not the biggest YouTuber. I'm not the biggest creator on my platforms. But we're most certainly the biggest people talking about it that are working full-time in the industry. That is a guarantee. Yeah. I can tell Very you that's true. A fact. And if you want to take someone that's dominating on YouTube and dominating on the other platforms, there is no one, literally no one doing what we're doing. And
dominating, I don't know. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think, well, I'm doing pretty good. I'll back myself. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Closing on 40k subs. As I say it, so, and that's from a shallow perspective, but yeah, if we're talking about level of quality of actual,
I'm not talking
videos,
about any of that. I'm not talking about any of that.
Now, what are you talking about then?
I'm talking about the fact that you wake up every day, don't go to work, and make YouTube videos on MMA.
That is weird, isn't it? It still doesn't feel like a job, and I don't think it ever will. And I don't mean that from a perspective it doesn't feel like work, because I feel like work and a job are two different things. But I don't. When I think of the word job, it connotes. It connotes all the negative sides of a 9-to-5 general career, working graveyard shift, long hours, deadlines and stuff like that. That's what I think of when I think of job. That's why I say I feel like I don't have a job. So, and I take pride in that a lot. I'm sure you, to an extent, feel the same.
Followers and subscribers are becoming more irrelevant day by day. The stronger that these algorithms are getting, the more irrelevant these numbers are becoming. There's an element of utility to it, sure. An element. And I do mean an element. But for the most part, I've seen millions of Instagram pages that have 1 million. I'm not going to out who it is, but I've seen people with millions of followers on Instagram that are putting in their community posts, oh, hey guys, can you go and interact with my local post, recent post, so it does what? Make better content if people want to interact with it. People won't be shown anything they don't want to see. If you had 400,000 subscribers, but bad videos, no one would watch them. If I had 90 or 9,000 followers and made bad videos, no one would watch them. It's really as simple as that in today's market. So just coming back to your original point of where you said, oh, you're not dominating. I get why you say that, because there's 1 million people with a lot bigger metrics than you currently. But I'm talking from the perspective of you wake up Monday to Sunday and you don't have anything to think about in regards to your job other than to create MMA videos that people watch.
Great, especially when you say it like that, it's very true. And I think there's probably a lovely little place to wrap it up. And the main reason I say it is not just because we're over the hour mark, but also because your camera has decided to turn off in the last second or two. So I think that's a nice place to wrap up. But as I said earlier, and as you said too, sage-like knowledge being dropped today. I think just shows you how far we've come. There's a good place to wrap it up. This has been the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 90. That's Will. I'm Leo. We will see you next Sunday. Have a good one.